Hi, my name is Shannon Swanson. Today we'll be looking at the concept white privilege and how it has been constructed and developed over time. I'll be using visual arts to illustrate this concept. Conceptualizing the role of white privilege allows us to explore the history between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people and acknowledge the inequalities that are still prominent in our society. Bain Atwood refers to this as the burden of the past in the present. This concept is also known as whiteness and explores the prejudice which operate to privilege Euro-Australian rights, in which oppress Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. In order to break the system that operates to privilege white Australians, we must reflect on whether or not our values are reinforcing racialised inequality. We must recognise our violent history in which the practice of epistemology of ignorance has extirpated Euro-Australians from viewing the effects of racial hierarchy. As pre-service teachers, we can create patterns of racial oppression or attainment within the Australian curriculum, and thus hegemonic understandings around race can be used as a tool to maintain these inequalities. In order to grasp this concept, we must first acknowledge our past in which formed the concept of whiteness. I drew upon artist Yeoni Scarce, a descendant of the Kukatha and Nuana people, whose work draws upon her personal family history. This piece is titled The Cultivation of Whiteness and investigates the idea of containment of Aboriginal people. Scarce's work often takes shape as Australian fruits in which metaphorically represent Aboriginal Australian people, cultures and traditions, and the use of glass to act as a lens and a mirror to reflect and expose the tragedies of colonisation. On first glance, how does this piece make you feel? Do you feel the artist has communicated her intended message? At first, my eyes are drawn to the contrast and the use of white space to emphasise the alignment of objects. I notice the vitreous bush bananas in which symbolically represent Aboriginal people and land. This virtuous form is full of anguish, heartbreak, and yet beauty. Contained in laboratory files which can represent experiments and examinations of Aboriginal people. The use of glass is expressive and allows us to reflect on the colonisation of Australia. Scarce's work draws upon her family's history. In The Cultivation of Whiteness, she draws upon Australia's violent history, in which her relatives were subjected to medical scrutiny in the belief that colour could be bred out, and thus whiteness cultivated. Such experiments incarcerated Aboriginal people, could elude the practice of miscegenation that led to today's stolen generation. How have these experiments shaped white privilege? Scarce's work allows us to recognise the anguish of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islands and the violent past of Australians' history, in which favours Euro-Australians based on skin colour. It can suggest that participants of whiteness are often unaware that they hold privileges in white society, in which these privileges are invisible, unearned, and not consciously acknowledged. What do you think the Cower meant with this misstatement? Do you agree or do you disagree? Please discuss with your groups. Harrison and Sherwood wrote that some primary teachers acknowledge that they know little about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and therefore question how they can be expected to include these cross-curriculum perspectives in their programs. How does the lack of knowledge reinforce the concept of white privilege? Do you feel white privilege is evident in Australia today? If so, to what extent and in what form? White privilege refers to the unknown privileges and power in white majority societies, in which is formed through failure to recognise the historical oppression against those who are not white. I want you to look around your classroom and look at the people next to you. Do you see it? Representations of white people and white culture everywhere, a culture in which do not represent themselves as white, but merely as people because that is the norm. In no way is this concept demonising or essentialising those who are racially white or valorise those who are not, nor suggesting that being privileged makes you immune to life's hardships or that Euro-Australians should be ashamed of white privilege. I ask you to reflect on the privileges you have or do not have in society now or when you are growing up. As citizens and future teachers, we have the ability to transform these social imbalances through confronting our privileges and through recognising the inequality in society. Thank you.